He is a pathetic warrior. I mean, the fact is that they've literally lost almost all of the soldiers that they started out with. They've lost 95% of their tanks. Just yesterday, one of their most valuable surveillance aircraft was shot out of the sky. Um, you've got heating systems all over Russia breaking down, people protesting because they're freezing cold. I mean, it's not a good situation militarily or economically or socially in Russia right now.
Been talking about our dangerous world this morning. It's one of the mini themes of our program. And one of the greatest sources of risk is Russia and Vladimir Putin. It remains the case, even though there are others coming to rival it. One man who's been tireless in taking the fight to the Putin regime is Bill Browder. He's making a speech at Davos on the subject, and we can speak to him now. Morning, Bill.
Good morning to you.
Do you think that Putin, in a way, he looked very vulnerable maybe a year ago? He's had quite a strong year in a certain sense, and his behavior in Ukraine has been normalized. His behavior towards people like Navalny has been normalized. I wonder if the perceived threat of him has diminished, even though the actual threat has not.
Well, for sure, the actual threat is extreme. We can see this in every possible way in the bombing of different cities in Ukraine, of the the way in which he's pushing around Western countries. I would also say that the perception of his danger hasn't diminished that much. I would say that what has happened is that as time has gone on, people have become inured to his evil. As time has gone on, people have stopped paying attention to it. And of course, there was this horrible October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, which distracted attention. And so you put all that together, and he's kind of winning the battle where he can put all of his attention into this, and the West has got limited bandwidth and limited attention, and we're sort of seeing the effects of that right now.
I also think that there's something in that first stage of the war. He and Russia seemed a little pathetic. They seemed a little backward in how they were prosecuting the war. And everyone had lots of people had high expectations about Ukraine kicking them out. They did better than expected at the beginning, and then there was this great expectation upon them, which has not transpired. And I wonder if that impacts how we see Putin. He's seen as slightly less damaged than perhaps he was 2 years ago, rightly or wrongly.
Well, you're right. I mean, in the first few days of the war, we all thought, or everybody thought, that Ukraine was going to lose in 3 days, that Zelensky would jump on a U.S. helicopter, and that Russians would march into Kiev. And of course, that didn't happen. And then the Ukrainians started fighting back valiantly and totally unexpectedly and successfully. And then we probably overestimated how easy it was for them to kick the Russians out. And it's one thing to defend yourself. It's you lose less people defending yourself. The aggressor is the one with who suffers the casualties. And so that was Russia's story in 2022. And then 2023, we were all looking for this counteroffensive to be successful. And then in that sense, Ukraine was the offensive party, and Russia had dug in. And so the counteroffensive didn't work. But I wouldn't say that we should be saying, wow, Putin is really a strong warrior. He is a pathetic warrior. I mean, the fact is that they've literally lost almost all of the soldiers that they started out with. They've lost 95% of their tanks. Just yesterday, one of their most valuable surveillance aircraft was shot out of the sky. You've got heating systems all over Russia breaking down, people protesting because they're freezing cold. I mean, it's not a good situation militarily or economically or socially in Russia right now.
How much do you think Putin would like Donald Trump to win the next election? He made a big stride towards it today. He's looking fairly impregnable, at least when it comes to the Republican nomination. Who do you think Putin wants to win that election?
Well, there's no question that Putin loves Trump, and I would argue that Trump loves Putin. And so it's kind of a match made in heaven for Putin. This is his Hail Mary. If somehow Trump becomes president, Trump has effectively said he would cut off Ukraine. If the United States cuts off Ukraine, then about half of the military and financial aid that comes to Ukraine will dry up. And that would be a real big problem. And so this is Putin's, Putin doesn't care how many soldiers he loses. He can lose another 100,000, 200,000 between now and November. But if Trump comes in, then that gives him a totally unexpected advantage that he didn't have when he first started this war.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, that, and plays together a lot of the stories that are around today. Bill, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Bill Browder there. He's making a speech about the risk, the threat of Vladimir Putin at Davos today.